Okay, so we're starting. Okay. Umagyanatmirandasya yananjana shalakaya chakshurnitanjena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. All right, so we're continuing with our Īśopanishad study, discussion, and I believe we're at verse number 3. Is that right, Subhasini Didi? Okay.
Yes,
Then,
yeah.
do you want to lead us in this verse, Didi? It looks like a heavy one.
Asurya namate loka antena tamasavrita tamste pretya vigachanti yeke chatmahano jana. Translation. The killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the worlds of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. Purport. Human life is distinguished from animal life due to its heavy responsibilities. Those who are cognizant of these responsibilities and who work in that spirit are called suras, godly persons. And those who are neglectful of these responsibilities or have no information of them are called asuras, demons. Throughout the universe, there are only these two types of human being. The Rig Veda, it is stated that the suras always aim at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Vishnu and act accordingly. Their ways are as illuminated as the path of the sun. Intelligent human beings must always remember that the soul obtains a human form after an evolution of many millions of years in the cycle of transmigration. The material world is sometimes compared to an ocean, and a human body is compared to a solid boat designed especially to cross this ocean. The Vedic scriptures and the acharyas or saintly teachers are compared to expert boatmen, and the facilities of the human body are compared to a favorable breezes that help the boat ply smoothly to its desired destination. If with all these facilities a human being does not fully utilize his life for self-realization, he must be considered Atmaha, a killer of the soul. Śrī Īśopanishad warns in clear terms that the killer of the soul is destined to enter into the darkest region of ignorance, to suffer perpetually. There are swine, dogs, camels, asses, etc., whose economic necessities are just as important to them as ours are to us. But the economic problems of these animals are solved only under nasty and unpleasant conditions. The human being is given all facilities for a comfortable life by the laws of nature, because the human form of life is more important and valuable than animal life. Why is man given a better life than that of a swine and other animals? Why is a highly placed government servant given better facilities than those of an ordinary clerk? The answer is that a highly placed officer has to discharge duties of a higher nature. Similarly, the duties human beings have to perform are higher than those of animals, who are always engaged in simply feeding their hungry stomachs. Yet the modern soul-killing civilization has only increased the problems of the hungry stomach. When you approach a polished animal in the form of a modern civilized man and ask him to take interest in self-realization, he will say that he simply wants to work to satisfy his stomach and that there is no need of self-realization for a hungry man. The laws of nature are so cruel, however, that despite his denunciation of the need for self-realization and his eagerness to work hard to fill his stomach, he is always threatened by unemployment. We are given this human form of life not to work hard like asses, swine, and dogs, but to attain the highest perfection of life. If we do not care for self-realization, the laws of nature force us to work very hard, even though we may not want to do so. Human beings in this age have been forced to work hard like the asses and the bullocks that pull carts. Some of the regions where the asuras are sent to work are revealed in this mantra of Śrī Īśopanishad. If a man fails to discharge his duties as a human being, he is forced to transmigrate to the Asuriya planets and take birth in the degraded species of life to work hard in ignorance and darkness. In the Bhagavad Gita, 641.
Do you think that's a typo there? I think the Asuriya, I think it means Asura, right?
Yeah, it should be Asura. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be a typo.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the Bhagavad Gita 641-43, it is stated that a man who enters upon the path of self-realization but does not complete the process despite having sincerely tried to realize his relationship with God is given a chance to appear in a family of Suchi or Srimad. The word Suchi indicates a spiritually advanced Brahmana, and Srimad indicates a Vaishya, a member of the mercantile community. So, the person who fails to achieve self-realization is given a better chance in his next life due to his sincere efforts in this life. If a fallen candidate is given a chance to take birth in a respectable and noble family, one can hardly imagine the status of one who has achieved success. By simply attempting to realize God, one is guaranteed birth in a wealthy or aristocratic family. But those who do not even make an attempt, who want to be covered by illusion, who are too materialistic and too attached to material enjoyment, must enter into the darkest regions of hell, as confirmed throughout the Vedic literature. Such materialistic asuras sometimes make a show of religion, but their ultimate aim is material prosperity. The Bhagavad Gita 16:17-18 rebukes such men by calling them Atma Sambhavita, meaning that they are considered great only on the strength of deception and are empowered by the oaths of the ignorant and by their own material wealth. Such asuras, devoid of self-realization and knowledge of Ishavasya, the Lord's universal proprietorship, are certain to enter into the darkest regions. The conclusion is that as human beings, we are meant not simply for solving economic problems on a tottering platform, but for solving all the problems of the material life into which we have been placed by the laws of nature.
All right. Quite a heavy one this week. I mean, I kind of feel like we covered a lot of these issues recently. We had that discussion on hell like a week or two ago. So I don't know if I want to go through all that again.
Had that discussion last night also.
We did?
Okay, well, kind of.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to go through that again. I'll just perhaps one, I mean, this phrase is Atmaha. You hear this sometimes mentioned in the scripture, you know, the killer of the soul, right? And, you know, this is the idea that when we are going into the mode of exploitation, we are working against ourselves. You know, it is like we are killing our soul in a sense. There's this one talk of Śrī Īśopanishad where he says that, he explains that because of the nature of the soul is to give, right? This is the constitutional nature of the soul, to be in the mode of dedication, giving, sacrifice, love, right? And so Śrī Īśopanishad says that, he says the soul grows through giving, right? In the just being in the spirit of giving, that opens the soul, that helps to awaken the soul, because that's coming in consonance with what is the nature of the very nature of the soul. And so therefore then the opposite is also true, right? That when we enter the mode of selfishness and exploitation, we're killing the soul in a sense. You know, we're closing, we are inhibiting, we're constraining, we're shrinking the soul, we're putting chains on the soul, you could say. So that's, you know, that's a, you know, and you know, like even just in a general sense, you know, just to get in the spirit of giving, even if it's in a mundane sense, that's actually a start, right? Like Param Guru Maharaj has quoted that expression, you know, practice the hand to give, right? Even if you're giving ashes, right? There's an expression like that, right? Even if you're giving ashes, give ashes, but practice the hand to give. Like that's how important it is to live in that type of spirit, you know, because that's already starting to like remove the chains of the soul. You know, we grow, we gain, and it's a curious thing, and it's like opposite the mundane conception. We gain by giving, we gain, right? By giving, we think we're, by a mundane calculation, we're losing, but in a broader sense, we're actually gaining. So I think that's, I don't know if I want to get into all this discussion about hell and darkness and ignorance and punishment. We did that already. So. Maybe we'll just move on to the next verse. Anyone else? Anyone want to bring any points up here?
It makes me feel very lucky to be in this life, you know.
Speak more loudly.
So it makes me feel very fortunate to be in this life, to be surrounded by devotees and the temples and the scriptures, because well, you have to imagine what I must have gone through in previous lives to come all this way. So like, why am I not a swine? You know, why am I not somebody, you know, some animal that's being, you know, turned into food right now? Like, I must have gone through something to bring me here, and that's just, it really blows my mind. Yeah, very fortunate.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, perhaps we'll just touch a little bit on that, you know, on the subject of becoming a swine. Perhaps we'll just touch on that idea a little bit. See, the idea is that free will is a precious gift, right? And it's given to us on the, you know, with the understanding that we will use it for good, right? Because this gift of free will, you can also cause havoc with it, right? So the purpose of free will is to be used for good for ourselves and good for others, good for the environment. It's a precious gift. We can't take that for granted. So the idea is that if we misuse that gift to create, you know, disturbance in the environment, if we use that gift to inflict suffering on others, then it has to be restricted. If we're using that gift of free will solely for selfish purposes, then it has to be curtailed, has to be cut, just like prison, right? So lower species of life, animals, it's like a type of prison. The human birth, in a sense, is also something of a prison, but less so, because we have more freedom. But these animal births are, it's just like someone in society, right? It's all common sense, right? In society, if someone is misusing their rights as free citizens, then they'll be put into prison, right? Because they're using their freedom for bad, right? They're creating disturbance in the environment. So then their freedom has to be cut back, has to be limited. And then, okay, now you've gone through some correction. Now we're going to give you a second chance, right? So it's the same like that. The lower species of life, the free will is very, it's practically not there. Some degree, no doubt, but it's practically not there, to the point that animals don't even incur karma, because it's considered that they're not being held responsible. They're mostly just living out by their instincts, and they're burning off karma, good karma and bad karma. So they're not held responsible. So they're not incurring karma. So this is why the human birth is so precious, and why we want to take advantage, right? This gift is to be used. This gift is to be used for a higher purpose. Scarlett has her hand raised. Love to hear from you, Scarlett.
I'm a bit confused. I thought the soul never dies. How can I understand that we shouldn't do certain things and live by the regulation and so on. That I understand and I respect. But what I don't understand, how can someone kill the soul when soul is never die? That I don't understand. Why phrase it the killer of the soul? I don't understand that.
Well, it's not, we have to remember not everything is to be taken strictly literally. So it's not that literally the soul can be killed, but it's that you are sorry, some baby noises or something, I don't know. The idea is that we are inhibiting our true nature, right? That we are it's a kind of, there are different types of death, right? People may conceive of death in different ways, right? Like there's we may feel that, like if we're suffering from heartbreak, right? That's a type of death, right? We may feel that we've died, right? So sometimes these words aren't used in the strictly literal sense, but the idea is that the soul is being squished, or what's a better word?
Put down. It's like we're
like suffocated. There's another word though. Contained, limited, restricted, reduced, right? The soul is being, there's a better word.
Crushed.
We're putting our soul in a very tiny little box, in a little prison. And whereas the soul wants wings, right? So when we're moving towards the spirit of dedication, when we're moving towards God consciousness, then the soul is starting to wake up, right? The soul will start to awaken, blossom, right? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he gives a very helpful explanation of different stages of consciousness, right? 5 stages of consciousness. Let me see if I can remember now. There's Achadita Chetan, means like heavily covered consciousness. And that means consciousness that's so reduced that there's like no movement, because movement is a symptom of consciousness. So like stones, also trees, they fall in that category, Achadita Chetan. Then there's I believe next is Sankuchita Chetan. Then there's like animals, animals who have a little more awakened consciousness, but mostly living by their instinct, right? Then there's very basic, lower level human life, You know, there's human life that's practically like animal life, right? Just living according to base instinct, right? And then the fourth stage, Vikashita Chetan, blooming, blossoming consciousness, is where one's entering into the culture of theism in some way, in some regulated way, you know, entering into God culture, awareness of the true nature of the self. And then the highest stage is Purna Vikashita Chetan, fully blossomed consciousness, where the soul, this is Vaishnavism, where there's the natural, automatic movement of the soul towards the Lord. You know, that is the nature of the soul. So there are these different stages of consciousness, but at the lowest stage, there's this dense covering over the soul, over the consciousness, and it's not exhibiting its true, glorious, bright nature. You know, so this is the idea, you know. You know, it's like you know, like we could, like another way it's expressed in the scriptures is like self-suicide, right? To, you know, to enter into selfishness, to turn away from the Lord, that's like a type of suicide, actually. And really, and you know, ultimately, we're just missing out on a wonderful prospect, right? So like that. Okay. Okay, anyone else have any comments or questions, or should we go on to the next verse? Suvasini Didi, anything you'd like to bring up?
No, I don't have anything to add, Didi. No, thank you.
Okay, so
Could I say something?
please give it higher to go.
It seems to me that the killer of the soul is our status being here. Like he's talking about us as being the killer of the soul.
Sorry, can you say that again? I wasn't following.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems that since we're here in this material world, like the killer of the soul is where we have ended up, right? We're in that part of being covered by ignorance. I mean, he parses it out like, yeah, we can go down further, but it seems like we're already in a place full of darkness and averse from our own real position.
Yes, absolutely. We're in the self-suicide category.
Okay, thank you.
Echo wants to say something too. You want to say something?
This is just where we have free choice and free will.
Right.
It's kind of what we were talking about last night. If I choose to be small, then we're basically crushing our soul or killing our soul that wants to fly. And we can do things to, it's our choice what we're going to choose in every given moment. And it has to be a conscious choice. And I believe that's what that was saying as well. So it's like we are putting ourselves in our own hell, or we can decide to go towards but it's self-realization is what it said.
Right. Yeah, we're kind of like in this gray area, right? Where we are, you know, we're still under the influence of self-suicide tendencies, right? But we're trying to move away from that, right? So we're like in this kind of awkward transition, right? We're just like in a very complicated position where we're on both sides. There's this one verse in Srimad Bhagavatam saying that two types of people are happy, you know, the enlightened souls and the ignorant souls. And everyone else in the middle, they're suffering. So we're like on moving towards both, right?
The ignorant souls think they're happy now.
Right. It's an ignorance is bliss scenario. Right. It's a house of cards that could come tumbling down at any moment.
Yeah.
And welcome to Sue Devi, who's also tuned in. Okay, Shu, thank you for adding that, Giritar Prabhu. And should we go back then? Okay, go back to our screen share. Dulal Prabhu, do you want to read that? This one.
Anejad ekam manaso jivyo nanda deva apunavan purvam ashat tadavato nyan adyati tishhat tasmin apo matrishva tadhati. Translation: although fixed in his abode, the personality of Godhead is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. The powerful demigods cannot approach him. Although in one place he controls those who supply the air and rain, he surpasses all in excellence. Let me read the purport. Purport. Through mental speculation, even the greatest philosopher cannot know the Supreme Lord, who is the absolute personality of Godhead. He can be known only by his devotees through his mercy. In the Brahma Samhita 534, it is stated that even if a non-devotee philosopher travels through space at the speed of the wind or the mind for hundreds of millions of years, he will still find that the absolute truth is far, far away from him. The Brahma Samhita, chapter 537, further describes that the absolute personality of Godhead has his transcendental abode, known as Goloka, where he remains and engages in his pastimes, yet, by his inconceivable potencies, he can simultaneously reach every part of his creative energy. In the Vishnu Purana, his potencies are compared to the heat and light that emanate from a fire. Although situated in one place, a fire can distribute its light and heat for some distance. And similarly, the absolute personality of Godhead, although fixed in his transcendental abode, can diffuse his different energies everywhere. Although his energies are innumerable, they can be divided into three principal categories: the internal potency, the marginal potency, and the external potency. There are hundreds and millions of subheadings to each of these categories, and the dominating demigods who are empowered to control and administer such natural phenomena as air, light, and rain are all classified within the marginal potency of the absolute person. Lesser living beings, including humans, also belonging to the Lord's marginal potency. The material world is the creation of the Lord's external potency, and the spiritual sky, where the kingdom of God is situated, is the manifestation of his internal potency. Thus, the different energies of the Lord are present everywhere.
Would you mind scrolling here? Because some people are following in here.
There we go. Thus, the different energies of the Lord are present everywhere. Although the Lord and his energies are non-different, one should not mistake these energies for the supreme truth, nor should one wrongly consider that the Supreme Lord is distributed everywhere, impersonally, or that he loses his personal existence. Men are accustomed to reaching conclusions according to their capacity for understanding, but the Supreme Lord is not subject to our limited capacity for understanding. It is for this reason that the Upanishads warn us that no one can approach the Lord by his own limited potency. In the Bhagavad Gita 10:2, the Lord says that not even the great rishis and suras can know him, and what to speak of the asuras, for whom there is no question of understanding the ways of the Lord. This fourth mantra of Śrī Īśopanishad very clearly suggests that the absolute truth is ultimately the absolute person. Otherwise, there would have been no need to mention so many details in support of his personal features. Although the individual parts and parcels of the Lord's potency have all the symptoms of the Lord himself, they have limited spheres of activity and are therefore all limited. the parts and parcels are never equal to the whole. Therefore, they cannot appreciate the Lord's full potency. Under the influence of material nature, foolish and ignorant living beings who are but parts and parcels of the Lord try to conjecture about the Lord's transcendental position. And Śrī Īśopanishad warns of the futility of trying to establish the identity of the Lord through mental speculation. One should try to learn of the transcendence from the Lord himself, the supreme source of the Vedas, for the Lord alone has full knowledge of the transcendence. Every part and parcel of the complete whole is endowed with some particular energy to act according to the Lord's will. When the part and parcel living entity forgets his particular activities under the Lord's will, he is considered to be in Maya illusion. Thus, from the very beginning, Śrī Īśopanishad warns us to be very careful to play the part designated for us by the Lord. This does not mean that the individual soul has no initiative of his own. Because he is part and parcel of the Lord, he must partake of the initiative of the Lord as well. And when a person properly utilizes his initiative or active nature with intelligence, understanding that everything is the Lord's potency, he can revive his original consciousness, which was lost due to association with Maya, the external energy. All power is obtained from the Lord. Therefore, each particular power must be utilized to execute the will of the Lord and not otherwise. The Lord can be known by one who has adopted such a submissive service attitude. Perfect knowledge means knowing the Lord in all his features, knowing his potencies, and knowing how these potencies work by his will. These matters are described by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita, the essence of all the Upanishads.
All right. Thank you, Bilal, for the. Okay, so Īśopanishad, right, is one of the Upanishads, and as we mentioned earlier on at the start of this journey, this is, we're seeing very much sometimes the style of the Upanishads here in this Īśopanishad. And what is that style? That there's this kind of vagueness and haziness, right? And so let's see what actually so like this, the Supreme Person is swifter than them, although fixed in his abode, the Supreme Person is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. So this is kind of like, hazy description of the nature of the Lord. And there are in other Upanishads, there are similar expressions, like although he has no legs, he can run faster than anyone. He has no eyes, but he sees everything. And these types of descriptions, and generally they kind of encourage the impersonal conception of the absolute, right? They're very like kind of vague, right? So the idea of the absolute having no form, no personality, no specific qualities, this conception is encouraged, by these types of statements. But the idea is that it is to establish the divinity of the Lord, right? That he has no mundane attributes, he has no mundane form, right? But he has spiritual eyes, he has spiritual form, and so on. That's the idea that's actually being indicated. Let's see. And so Swami Maharaj, it seems like he's kind of emphasizing this distinction right here to kind of do away with this, what we call Mayavad conception, that we are also of the absolute, so Swami Maharaj is kind of emphasizing here that we are of a there's the infinite consciousness, we are of the finite consciousness, there are different potencies, different Shaktis, and they all have particular, we were having some discussion about this here last night, you know, there are different energies, the Lord, you know, has different potencies, and they all have particular characteristics. And so Swami Maharaj is going into some explanation about that. You know, it's really just, the thing is, and this is actually a very wonderful thing, everything is true. Everyone is right. Everyone is true. It's all about where you're standing, right? So it's like, you know, like last night I mentioned the analogy, you know, when if you're looking at a forest from a great distance, you just see one green blob, right? That it's all just, it's one, right? But when you from a certain point, that's what it looks like. And that's true. That's right. It's all one. But when you start to come in closer, then you see all the detail, right? And the specificity, the, you know, complex, sophisticated systems and unique individuals, relationships, right? All of those things come into 3D, right? So it's all just about where you're standing, right? Everything has its truth, right? Everything has its reality. So what it really comes down to is what we want and how deep of a hunger we have, right? And really, you know, there are many ways in which we can establish, you know, the value of Krishna consciousness. But for what I feel the most meaningful point is that we want love, right? And we need love. That's the core, right? And it's only when we embrace the, you know, the relationship with the Lord, right? And embrace his unique, you know, specified nature, characteristics, and our position in relation to him, that's when the loving relationship becomes possible. Right? But if we want to keep it's like a distant view that everything's one. Like, okay, go with that. But that's a very distant, like remote, it's a hazy view. It's like you have a superhero or a role model that you admire from a distance, you know, some, you know, Hollywood star or Bollywood star, whatever it may be, right? You adore them, right? They're, you know, people use the word idol, right? You've got posters on your wall, right? That's a real relationship, isn't it? But it's remote. Right? It may be like a deep thing that you feel in your heart, but it's still a remote relationship. Right? But if someone has the hunger, because this is what it is, it all comes down to taste, need, our hunger. We have a hunger for a more intimate relationship. Then we enter the family of that person. Then we come to know some of the details of their personality, their character, and there will be a specific way in which we fit in to their ecosystem, so to speak, right? There will be a specific way in which we relate to them, some particular relationship, right? So this is what Krishna consciousness is, coming into a family life with God, not seeing him as a far off, distant superhero, but like coming into the family of the Lord. You know, that's at its essence, right? And Srila Sridhar Maharaj points that out in one place, like no one can deny the power of love. The principle of love is above all. And that's what it ultimately comes down to. Love is the greatest principle in existence, the most powerful principle. Love, beauty, charm, you know, these represent the highest principles in existence. So it is in the Krishna, this is the significance of Krishna. He is the embodiment of that. Rasa, you know, he is the embodiment of rasa. Right? Akila Rasamrita Murti, this is Rupa Goswami's statement. He is the embodiment of all rasa, of all taste, all experience, all fulfillment, all happiness. Right? Krishna, that's who Krishna, his very name, Krishna, is referring to his power of attraction. He's so attractive. Right? That's what we're really craving, that beauty, that charm, that love. So that's the most significant point about the nature of Krishna, our relationship with Krishna, the supremacy of Krishna. It comes down to that. Our hearts are most satisfied in connection with him. Any other comments on this verse from our family here? Suvasini, Didi, anything you want to add?
Well, I would just, the first point Prabhupada makes here, he can be known only by his devotees through his mercy, right? So that is, I just wanted to highlight that. It is, how do we know him? It is only by his own grace. We really hanker for that. And also this verse, Yam evaisha vrinate tena labhya, right? That's also another statement from Upanishad, right? Is that right? I think it's all of the Upanishad.
Yeah, what's the first Nayam Atma
Pravachanena labhyo, yeah. Yeah, so he cannot be known by, extensive study of the scriptures or, by intelligence, but only by when he reveals himself, whom he chooses, we will know. So it is only through, we get a substantial connection through his own devotees. And also that is, in Bhagavad Gita also there are various verses which says like, Krishna can be known only through devotion. He says like, Bhaktyatva ananya shakya aham evam vidojjana Jnatum drashtum cha tatvena praveshtam cha parantapa. So only through devotion you can enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So Prabhupada translates that verse like that in the 11th chapter. Yeah. So that is, so I just want to highlight that, through devotion and through mercy, through surrender to his devotees. These are things which are helpful for our practice.
Yeah, beautiful point to emphasize, Didi. And the reason for that also is because Krishna is only about love, right? He doesn't feel a need to prove himself, right? It's not like he needs to come and dance under our microscope. I exist, and this is who I am. He doesn't suffer from an inferiority complex, and doesn't have to explain himself to everyone. But he's also interested in love, right? So he's only gonna. It's just like, again, it comes down to common sense. Like, we share our lives with people who care about us. Right? We share our lives with people who love us. Otherwise, why? What's the point? Right? It's not that we, to establish our ego or comfort ourselves in some way, but really, we want to share our lives with people who are sympathetic to us, right? So that's why it starts out with faith. Like, at least believe that I exist. Jeez. Like, why am I gonna like come and reveal myself to someone who's not even sure that I exist? Yeah. So it's like that. He's also interested in love, and he'll reveal himself to persons on the basis of love. That I love you, and then I want to know you. Right? Not that first I'm going to know you, then I'm going to decide whether I love you. That's not how love works. Right? And so then again, as Swami Maharaj is saying here, right, the link of the devotees is so important because they have more of a tangible relationship, and they're revealing in their association, we're getting some touch of that, and that's inspiring us, right, to also approach in that way and through that channel of the devotees. And again, this point about mercy is also very important, because it's not that, you know, we have some right over him, right? We're very finite, insignificant beings, right? We don't have any demands. It's not that he's under some obligation, right? But simply out of mercy, out of love, he will reveal himself to us. So we're approaching through the mercy channel. That's also very important. It's not that we, you know, not that we deserve it. We're owed something, right? That's not the case, but it's all going to be through mercy. How can the high and the low connect? Through mercy. You know, mercy removes all differences. Mercy removes all hierarchy or whatever, right? Mercy, love, compassion. So that's why, you know, this is why Sharanagati, right? Surrender is emphasized so much. We're appealing to that mercy channel, right? It's not that there's some equation, some formula that needs to be fulfilled, and I'm owed something, and this plus this equals that. It's not how it works, but we're just appealing to his compassion, to his mercy. Please just be kind to me, because you are kind. We're appealing through that channel. All right. Well, we have 7 minutes left. I don't know if I want to go on to the next verse. Let's see. Anyone else have any comments, any thoughts to share for the group today? Let's see who else is here.
There's some comments on the chat.
Oh yeah. Let's see here. Okay. Some insightful comments from Marie. Oh, Dana, stifled. That's the word. Well done. Thank you, Dana. That's it. Stifled. Yeah. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah. Steve's also suggesting crushed. But yeah, I think stifled is the closest word we've heard so far. Yeah. Okay, well here, this next verse, it's pretty much in line with that idea, which we were just discussing. Tada is like hazy, vague, Upanishad style, right? Which is very popular amongst a certain group of spiritualists. Tade ja, this is verse 5. Tade jati, tanai jati, tadure tadwantike, tadantar asya sarvasya, tadu sarvasyasya bhayataha. The Supreme Lord walks and does not walk. He is far away, but he is very near as well. He is within everything, and yet he is outside of everything. So there are certain people that just eat this stuff up. They love it. You know, it's like very hazy, and he's there and he's not there. You know, he is big and he is small, and he is everywhere and he is nowhere. You know, it's wonderful, you know, in line with the Brahmavad, like impersonal conception. But really, as I said already, it's establishing the transcendental nature of the Lord. Right? That it's beyond any experience of this mundane. You know, that's the first thing you have to establish, that this subject matter is beyond anything of your experience. That's the first thing. And you see that type of like systematic approach in some of the texts of our gurus. For example, you know, you'll see in the writings of our, you know, our Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas that often, before they really get into the real discussion, they're first establishing this point, the distinction between matter and spirit, right? So like in the Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamrita, right? How does he begin, right? Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam. He's talking about the mundane urges. and how we need to get those under control. And then he goes like all the way up to, you know, Radha Kund, Goloka Vrindavan, and all these high things. But that's where he starts. Like, first understand, as long as you're still under the influence of these mundane urges, you know, don't think you've entered that plane. So, Shikshash Mahaprabhu Shikshashtakam, Cheto Darpanamar, the very first line, clean the mirror of your consciousness. Because this is another danger in spiritual life, where we conflate the mundane and the spiritual, and we drag down the spiritual experience into the plane of the mundane. That's a problem. So that's why there's often this approach. First, let's clear the path. Let's establish the distinction between matter and spirit. And then we can go deeper into the discussion of the nature of spirit. Right. And so that's how, you know, we could say this whole discussion, this style of the Upanishads, it's kind of like the first step, like moving away from the plane of mundane aspiration, mundane activity. Let's first establish the nature of spirit and the superiority of spirit, the distinction, you know, between matter and spirit. Let's first establish that. So that's, we could say that's how that, you know, this framework, within that framework, this is where this all like fits in, right? The infinite, divine nature of the absolute, beyond anything of the mundane. And this, you know, we can also read all these things with a devotional filter too. Our Guru Varga, they do that too. So like this line, Tadure Tadwantike, our Guru Dev Srila Govinda Maharaj like this phrase. Dure is referring to far, right? And Antike is referring to close, within. So he's simultaneously far but close. And our Gurudev also, he used this phrase. I heard him quoted in different ways, a few times, you know, like one way you can apply it to in connection with the principle of Achincha Beda Bed, right? That we are simultaneously one with and distinct from the Lord. And also our Gurudev also used it in relation to the principle of separation from the Lord, right? That the devotees, the loving devotees of the Lord, they go through these two, you know, modes in relation to the Lord, that sometimes they're feeling this closeness and sometimes they're feeling this deep separation, which is actually intensifying the loving relationship. So, I don't think we have time to, well, maybe, should we just go through it? We still have a couple minutes. It's not so long. I'll just read through it. Akko says we have her undivided attention. I'll just read through this. Here is a description of some of the Supreme Lord's transcendental activities executed by his inconceivable potencies. The contradictions given here prove the inconceivable potencies of the Lord. He walks and he does not walk. Ordinarily, if someone can walk, it is illogical to say he cannot walk. But in reference to the Lord, such a contradiction simply serves to indicate his inconceivable power, with our limited fund of knowledge, we cannot accommodate such contradictions, and therefore we conceive of the Lord in terms of our limited powers of understanding. For example, the impersonalist philosophers of the Mayavad school accept only the Lord's impersonal activities and reject his personal feature. But the members of the Bhagavad school, adopting the perfect conception of the Lord, accept his inconceivable potencies and thus understand that he is both personal and impersonal. The Bhagavats know that without inconceivable potencies, there can be no meaning to the word Supreme Lord. We should not take it for granted that because we cannot see God with our eyes, the Lord has no personal existence. Śrī Īśopanishad refutes this argument by declaring that the Lord is far away, but very near also. The abode of the Lord is beyond the material sky, and we have no means to measure even this material sky. If the material sky extends so far, then what to speak of the spiritual sky, if the material sky extends so far, then what to speak of the spiritual sky, which is altogether beyond it. That the spiritual sky is situated far, far away from the material universe is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. But despite the Lord's being so far away, he can at once, within less than a second, descend before us with a speed swifter than that of the mind or wind. He can also run so swiftly that no one can surpass him. This has already been described in the previous mantra. Yet when the personality of Godhead comes before us, we neglect him. Such foolish negligence is condemned by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that the foolish deride him, considering him an immortal being. He is not a mortal being, nor does he come before us with a body produced of material nature. There are many so-called scholars who contend that the Lord descends in a body made of matter, just like an ordinary living being. Not knowing his inconceivable power, such foolish men place the Lord on an equal level with ordinary men. Because he is full of inconceivable potencies, God can accept our service through any sort of medium, and he can convert his different potencies according to his own will. Non-believers argue either that the Lord cannot incarnate himself at all, or that if he does, he descends in the form of material energy. These arguments are nullified if we accept the existence of the Lord's inconceivable potencies. Then we will understand that even if the Lord appears before us in the form of material energy, it is quite possible for him to convert this energy into spiritual energy. Since the source of the energies is one and the same, the energies can be utilized according to the will of their source. For example, the Lord can appear in the form of the Archa Vigraha, a deity supposedly made of earth, stone, or wood. Deity forms, although engraved from wood, stone, or other matter, are not idols, as the iconoclasts contend. In our present state of imperfect material existence, we cannot see the Supreme Lord due to imperfect vision. Yet those devotees who want to see him by means of material vision are favored by the Lord, who appears in a so-called material form to accept his devotees' service. So this is deity worship. One should not think that such devotees who are in the lowest stage of devotional service are worshiping an idol. They are factually worshiping the Lord, who has agreed to appear before them in an approachable way. Nor is the archa form fashioned according to the whims of the worshipper. This form is eternally existent with all paraphernalia. This can actually be felt by a sincere devotee, but not by an atheist. So this, maybe I'll just pick up this point here. This is actually quite an important point, because it's a topic that kind of comes up, right? Are we idol worshipers, right? That's something that comes up. And there's a difference. Idol worship means that you're projecting something onto some lump of matter. So we could say like adoration of stars and movie stars and so on. That's a type of idol worship. I mean, like I saw this documentary one. I've never been to like a big concert or anything, but I saw this documentary about the Beatles once. So it's these clips and showing like thousands of screaming girls with big signs. Oh, I love you, John. I love you, George, or whatever, right? And I'm like, they're actually worshiping God. Like they want to worship God, but they're projecting this onto these finite human beings. That's idol worship, right? So how is that? So what? It's not that we're just making some random mundane figure and projecting our ideas onto that, but we're in accordance with the revealed truth, which is describing the appearance of the Lord, and most crucially, in connection with the pure devotee who has a relationship with the Lord. We are manifesting this figure in the world. It's a descending thing. Like we'll consider that the deity is actually living in the heart of the Vaishnava and coming out from their heart, taking on some appearance within the world of our perception. That's what deity worship is, right? It's different from idol worship. It's a descending process, right? And I'll just add, one thing here, which Swami Maharaj doesn't go into here, but is important to understand that deity worship has this twofold nature. That on one level, yes, as Swami Maharaj is saying, deity worship, it is tailored. It's kind of like the idea behind deity worship is to support persons of lower faith who need to see like in the world of their perception, some tangible form of the Lord. This is what Swami Maharaj mentions here. But there's also another layer to deity worship, that for the enlightened, advanced Vaishnavas, there's also significance to deity worship for them, but it's in a different way. They're actually seeing the Lord. They're seeing the spiritual form of the Lord. So they have a particular relationship with the deity. You know, there was one occasion that Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he, I think, you know, we don't need to rush through these things. We can just stop our reading for today. You know, there's one really interesting point. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was asked once, you know, why is it Rup and Sanatan, they were doing Archan? Right? Archan refers to this like scripturally based, regulated style of deity worship, right? Where you're following particular practices, chanting particular mantras, right? And so someone asked Saraswati Thakur, like, why, like Rup and Sanatan, right? They're of the 6 Goswamis, so beloved eternal associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Why are they doing Archan? Why are they keeping deities? Like generally, that's something for neophyte practitioners, like they need the deity. And so Saraswati Thakur answered, they're not doing Archan, actually. They're doing direct bhajan. Right? Bhajan means like, you know, it's difficult to translate into English properly, but bhajan means like actual service, devotion. Like they're directly engaging with the Lord. It's not that they're following some practices recommended in the scriptures and ringing the bells and waving the fan like we're supposed to. That's not what they're doing. That's Archan. That's for people like us. They're actually having a living, they're seeing the Lord and having a living relationship with him. That's bhajan. That's what they're doing. So he said you can't compare the two things. Right? So it's a very interesting point. And we saw that with our gurus, you know, that they, you know, like our Gurudev would be concerned, you know, if the garland was too heavy on the deities. It was like he would be genuinely concerned about that. He didn't like pins on the clothes because he's thinking about them as people. He liked a night light to be on the altar. You know, he'd say things like, what if Krishna wants to go dancing in the night? You know, our Param Guru Maharaj, Śrī Īśopanishad would talk like that too. So they're having a totally different experience. You know? So the deity has this twofold kind of relationship, you could say, or in this, or purpose, or whatever the word is in this world. You know, the object of it's like a help, kind of like a helpful service practice for sadhakas, practitioners, but the deity also represents an object of love and adoration of the enlightened, advanced Vaishnava. So there's this twofold thing going on with the presence of deities in this world. Right? And we also hear in the case of the higher devotees, they're walking and talking with the deities, right? They're having a deep personal relationship with the deities. So I'll stop there for today. We won't go on too long. Thank you for your wonderful presence, all of you. It's been another lively meeting. Any last comments from anyone before we close for today? And thank you so much always to Suvasnidhi for hosting and also sharing your wonderful insight. Okay, this will close. Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. All the assembled devotees, sincere seekers ki Jai. Śrī Īśopanishad ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Raksha Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Shri A.C. Bhakti Swami Maharaj ki
Jai.
Jai.
Vishaka Didi ki Jai. Yeah, thank you, Vishaka. Thank you very much.
For today.
Yeah.
Assembled devotees ki Jai. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai, Jai.
Okay.